How long does a typical wrongful death case take to resolve? This is one of the most frequently asked questions that I get as a wrongful death attorney. The answer to the question is pretty complicated. It's not simple because I've resolved cases literally within 9 days of receiving the case. Wrongful death cases, big multi-million-dollar cases, literally within days of receiving the case. And then I've also had cases that have taken several years to resolve. So I wanted to give you some general guidance on what to expect in terms of how long it'll take to resolve your case. So the first thing I want to say is, on average, the wrongful death case in our firm, and we're constantly thinking about ways that are going to shorten the process. Obviously, we know that not only do our clients want to get full and fair compensation for their claim, but they want to get it over with. They want to get it over with now because it's just weighing on them. It's a heavy process. It's a challenging process. So we want to shorten that amount of time, and so we're constantly thinking of ways to shorten the amount of time. But on average, the wrongful death cases take about a year to resolve. But I also want to give you some factors in terms of how to understand how the process works. There are certain cases that can get resolved in a very short time, in days, weeks, or months, and not in years. And those are usually cases where we have a limited amount of insurance money, and we are making a settlement demand offer for the full policy limits. And we are able to present to the insurance carrier a demand package, a settlement demand package, with all of the evidence that they need to be able to justify paying for the full policy limits. And that evidence is usually in the form of expert witness testimony, in terms of affidavits or reports from expert witnesses, from doctors, medical providers, from liability experts, crash reconstructionists, and then life care planners, or economists that can calculate the damages that are related to a wrongful death case, like the loss of support and services or the loss of net accumulations of the deceased. So basically, in a case where there's a limited amount of insurance and we're going for the full policy limits, those cases can get resolved as soon as we are able to get the evidence together to justify the insurance company, to demand the insurance company to pay the full policy limits, and to put them in danger of what we call a bad faith claim. Because a bad faith claim ultimately is what arises when an insurance company has the opportunities to settle for the policy limits, and they have the evidence that they need that tells them that they should settle for the policy limits, and they've been given the opportunity to do so in a formal settlement demand package, with a formal settlement demand package. And if they fail to do so when they could have and should have done so, then they are considered to be in bad faith, and there's a possibility of getting not only the full policy limits, but actually in excess of the policy limits, the full amount of the value of the claim, regardless of what the policy limits are. But there's a way of doing about it by sending a settlement demand, by having a time limit on the demand, by having the evidence together that you need. And once that's done, then a lot of times they'll pay the policy limits. And what we do is, there's a Geico case where the appellate court has decided that 9 days was enough time for an insurance company to fully evaluate a claim. Now, that would be after they have the evidence available, but 9 days was enough. And so we send out 9-day time limit demands. And I have had situations, multiple situations, where I've made time limit demands 9 days, and then this case is resolved in 9 days from me making the settlement demand. So that does happen. But it doesn't happen in every case. I would say it probably happens it's a little bit rare for it to happen that way, because a lot of times with wrongful death cases, the insurance carriers are going to fight you on it. They're going to fight you on liability. They're going to fight you on causation. They're going to fight you on the damages. They're going to fight you at every turn. And in those situations, a lot of times we end up having to file a lawsuit. So let's talk about the time frame for filing a lawsuit. So first of all, it takes a little bit of time to get the complaint drafted, the initial discovery, and the summons and all that, all the paperwork that you need to initiate a lawsuit, that takes a little bit of time. Usually that can be done pretty quickly. Usually within 30 days, you can get that done. If you've decided to file a lawsuit, that it doesn't take that long. You file the lawsuit. Once you file the lawsuit, you have to wait for the summons to come back from the court. That usually takes about a week. And then after that, you can serve it on the defendant. Now, the courts give you up to 120 days to serve it on the defendant. However, we try to get it served as quickly as possible. Usually it's served within 30 days. Okay, once we serve it on the defendant, then the defendant will have 20 days to respond. Now, they can either respond with an answer to the complaint, which would be ideal, or sometimes they respond with a motion to dismiss the complaint. And the motion to dismiss is basically asking the court to kick the complaint out completely. They're asking the court not to accept the case. And so sometimes it takes months to get that the hearing regarding the motion to dismiss scheduled. And then once we get that scheduled and we go to hearing, almost every time we win on the motion to dismiss hearing. It's really just kind of a formality most of the time. And so there's really no reason to do it except for delay. But ultimately, we have to deal with the delay a lot of times, and we get that delay. Once the court rules in our favor, then they will usually give 10 or 20 days for the defendant to respond to the complaint. Once we get a response to the complaint, then we initiate paper discovery. Then we go through paper discovery. It's 45 days. They have 45 days from the date that the court will usually tell them how long they have, 30 or 45 days from the date that the court denies their motion to dismiss. And generally it's they can answer their discovery within 45 days of receiving the complaint. Okay, that's paper discovery. After that, we go into what we call the deposition phase, where the defense gets to take depositions of witnesses. We get to take depositions of witnesses. And so that process goes on. That usually lasts for about maybe 6 months or so. And then ultimately, we end up getting into a mediation. And the mediations are usually roughly about 9 months after you file the lawsuit, you get into a mediation. And the mediation is where everybody gets together, the defense gets together with the plaintiff side and a mediator who's supposed to be a neutral third party, and we get together and we try to get the case resolved. And about 75% of all cases get resolved at mediation. And that includes wrongful death cases. A lot of wrongful death cases get resolved at mediation. 3 out of 4 that are litigated get resolved at mediation. If it doesn't get resolved at mediation, that means you're pushing it towards trial. And the trial will usually be 3 to 6 months after mediation. Then that's when really people start getting to work. They start really doing final discovery and depositions and things that they wanted to put off until mediation because they didn't want to spend the money. Now all of a sudden mediation has happened, so you're spending the money, you're scrambling to get all the evidence together, get all your evidence out there. You've got your witness and exhibit list that is due. Both sides have to do their witness and exhibit list. They have to list their expert opinions. All these kind of things have to happen, and then you get ready for trial. A lot of times the cases settle sometime in between mediation and trial. Sometimes they settle at trial, and then ultimately, if it doesn't resolve at trial or before trial, then you go to trial and you get a verdict. Now, a lot of people think that once you get a verdict, it's over at that point, but that's not the case. Once you get a verdict, then you have basically you know what the jury, in that particular jury, is going to say about the case. So it gives you some information, more information to go on to possibly get your case settled after that. However, if you get a real good result, a real good jury verdict, 99 times out of 100, the defense is going to file an appeal. They're going to file a notice of an appeal. They're going to file an appellate brief. They're going to appeal the case, and the appellate process can very easily take years. Most of the time, an appellate decision comes out in about a year, maybe 2 years. And so that can just add years to the process. So there are several opportunities to get the case resolved usually before that happens. But in the worst case scenario, you're talking years and years. And then if it doesn't settle, or if the court determines that you lose the appeal, then you have to do a do-over, which means you have to try the case over again. You have to go through the whole process again. And that takes years. So that was a long answer to a short question, but it gives you some idea about what you're looking at going forward in your wrongful death case. Obviously, the goal is to try to get the case resolved for the full and fair value of the case as early as possible. The way to do that is through evidence and gathering the evidence through expert testimony, talking liability experts, life care plan experts, or economist experts, all different types of experts, causation experts, whatever kind of experts you need, getting that evidence together, getting the evidence of your damages together, and showing the insurance carrier that this is a very serious case, that if they don't pay now, they're going to have to pay later. The key to get the case resolved, you have to understand, insurance carriers do not settle cases out of the kindness of their hearts. They do not settle cases because it's the right thing to do. They do not settle cases for any other reason except that they feel like if they settle the case now, they'll be saving money in the long run. So they were like, well, pay now or pay later. If we settle the case now, we're going to save money in the long run because we don't want to risk a jury verdict that's a runaway verdict or a bigger verdict. We don't have to pay defense costs, which is the defense attorney and all the experts. I mean, that can be literally hundreds of thousands of dollars. And so that's how you get the cases resolved. All right, I'm Jimmy Fasig. I am a wrongful death lawyer. If you want any more details about any of this, please feel free to give me a call. My number is 850-777-7777. That's 850-777-7777. Thank you so much.